All right, good morning. We are now ready to begin chapter 8 in the studies of the Tanya. Have you ever found yourself running to visit someone in the hospital or running to help somebody out? Maybe someone got a flat tire, they need to be picked up or something, and you're kind of running out of the house and your stomach is grumbling, you're starving, and you grab something to eat and you run out of the house, right? Maybe you sit down fast, eat it up quickly, and then run out. When you ate that food, were you thinking any deep, holy thoughts as you were eating that food, that you were just kind of wanting to settle your stomach and go out and eat and go out and do what you need to do? So there's a good chance that you were simply starving, you ate the food, you didn't think about any spiritual aspect of the food that you're eating. You kind of just went, ate, and that was it. And so today we are going to learn that that food that you ate at that moment, although you were not engaged in any spiritual meditative practices and how this food that you're eating is going to be transformed to serve God or be elevated, not only the food on your plate, but also all those in the food chain, the supply chain that brought the food to you. You didn't think about all the deep details of the nutrients that the food has, the spiritual components of it. You simply ate the food. However, because you ate that food while you were going to do something good for somebody else, you have actually automatically elevated that food and made that food into a spiritual vessel. And you've also utilized the food for its divine given purpose. In the previous chapter, we spoke about the holiness, we spoke about unholiness, and we spoke about neutrality, that which is neutral. It's not holy, but it's not necessarily holy either. So something that is holy is holy no matter what. It always retains its holiness. A Torah scroll or any mitzvah that we do is a holy thing, a holy object. But then you have that which is not holy, and that is something that is completely impure, completely spiritually impure, meaning to say completely spiritually unholy, that we cannot do anything with this object. We cannot not only not use it for holiness, but even if we use it for holiness, we cannot permeate it and imbue it with any goodness. It is a completely bad act. Or bad is the wrong word. It's a completely unholy thing. Okay? And then you have that which is neutral. So it has a status of not holy, but not holy. And through our actions, we can elevate it. Normally, let's say we take this drink. If I want to make sure that this drink becomes a holy drink, so I make a blessing over it, which I'm imbuing it or infusing it with holiness, with a God's word, God's name. And then I use the water that I have, the energy that I have, that I've been satiated with, to be able to do good. So now I've elevated this bottle of water that was once a simple bottle of water. Now I've used it for something holy. If I just jog it down without thinking, then it remains unholy. But I can take that neutral object and I can use it for holiness. This is up to us. But there are times we can take that neutral thing and we automatically use it for a godly purpose. We are automatically utilizing it and making it holy, okay? Because we are now taking that energy with that energy bar that I took while I was running out of the house to visit someone in the hospital. That mere fact that I'm going to visit someone in the hospital and I'm using the energy from that bar, that means that I've elevated that bar to something of a holy purpose. in other words, without me thinking about it, I have the power to utilize something for goodness and for holiness, or elevate it to holiness. Doesn't necessarily require a conscious meditative practice to elevate it. Sometimes subconsciously, the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm engaging in, can elevate it to holiness. And the same thing is also with the flip side. There are times that I can do things in a non-conscious manner that I'm actually doing something for the opposite of holiness, and I'm giving power and energy to the bad. Let's say, for example, if we engage in idle talk, okay, just idle talk, we're not talking about gossiping about somebody else, because that's a whole nother subject, and that itself is a bad thing. We cannot talk bad about other people. We can't talk about other people. We're just chatting about silliness, about nothing, about the weather, let's just say, okay? It's not bad. It's nothing bad about talking about the weather, but I'm just wasting my time chatting about the weather, or sports. Okay, let's say something that is less, just sports, or cooking, or whatever. So I'm not talking about a person, which could be bad. I'm talking about just something that is nothing. It's just chatter, idle chatter. It's called idle talk. That itself, that idle talk, can be considered a colossal waste of time, right? Meaning to say that we as a human being have only a certain amount of time during the day, and instead of utilizing those moments for something spiritual, something good, something holy, we are just chatting and wasting our time. Now, again, to be clear, it's not bad talk. It's not evil talk. We're not talking about anybody, but it's wasted talk, okay? So we've now wasted 10 minutes just doing nothing, just chatting about sports, about the weather, okay? Now, if a person spent 10 minutes surfing through social media, then that perhaps can be categorized as gossiping, because we are looking at other people's stories and thinking about their life, and maybe we're sharing other people's stories or liking other people's stories. That possibly can fall to the category of gossip, which you're not allowed to do. We're now talking about simple idle talk, watching a sports game, okay? Let's just say, or watching the weather, not news again, maybe gossip. I'm not talking about it, but a simple thing that is just about the world. That 10 minutes that I spent idling about can be considered a waste of time. Now, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. But is it a good thing? Not necessarily either. It didn't enhance my life in any way. It didn't make me to a better person. Now, if we're consciously thinking about how can I better serve God, how can I be a better human being, then we have to ask ourselves, wait a second, how can I possibly even waste 1 minute when I can better use that time in a productive, spiritually elevating, and holy manner? And instead, I just wasted my time. Now, one can argue that that waste of time is necessary because I need to recharge myself. If my mind is constantly thinking about godly things, my head will explode. I kind of need to decompose sometimes, right? And that's true. So if I'm just watching the sports because I need to just relax and think about nothing, just kind of refocus or re-energize my brain because it's too heavy or too intense, then I've now used that idle time for actually something productive. It's not simple idle chatter. It is idle chatter only to clear my mind. So now I have more energy to be able to fill my head once again with good things. You understand the difference? Such a subtle difference. So if I'm just watching sports because I'm watching sports, I wasted 10 minutes or 3 hours, whatever. If I watched it in order to relax my brain. So now when I'm done the game, I can go back with refocus and help out or study or whatever I need to do acts of godly things, godly pursuits. Now that time that I spent watching the weather or the news or the sports, now I've used it for a good purpose. Okay. Now we all know that if a person eats a food that is bad for them, that upsets their stomach, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to fix your stomach that has been upset by this food that you ate? So either you'll start a certain type of diet that will cleanse your system from that food that is sticking to your body that is hurting you, or you'll do some other kind of exercise or whatever it is that your doctor recommends or your nutritionist tells you to do. Okay? The same thing is also spiritually. When we do things that is not good for our spiritual self, for our physical body or our soul, we have to cleanse it also. We have to clean it of all that plaque that got stuck to our intestines. Now, if there's a certain food that sticks to us, then a simple drink of water will not flush it out. We need a better type of food or drink to completely flush it out of our system, maybe even medication to get it off our system. The plaque is sticking to our arteries that we need something much stronger to get it out of our system. If you have if your sink is clogged, your pipes are clogged, so water won't just wash it out. You may need Drano or something much stronger to clean it out. And so it's also our inner pipes, our physical pipes, and how much more so our spiritual pipes, right? Sometimes a little thing of water could clean it out, and sometimes it needs some Drano, some really heavy duty chemicals to go through our system to flush out any bad things. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is telling us. He's saying, wait a second, you're a human being that has been created by God in the image of God with a soul of God. We have the neutral soul, the animal soul, which the Alter Rebbe calls, and you have the godly soul. So you have a part of God in you. How are you, the Alter Rebbe is asking, how are you utilizing your godly soul? How are you feeding your godly soul? How is your spiritual aspect growing into a more wholesome, complete human being? Are you simply feeding your animalistic soul because it makes me feel good? Or are you also trying to grow in a more spiritual, godly, and holy manner? And while you're growing in this godly, holy manner, what happened to all the time that you've filled the space with unholy things? You've clogged these certain spiritual arteries that are now perhaps not allowing the godly energy to flow through because you have all these obstructions. And so we have to break apart and clarify and understand how we could possibly and accurately focus on our ultimate purpose and spiritual self. Now, the Rebbe wants to tell us, of course, the name of the book is called the Book of the Beinoni, the Book of the Intermediate, that always spends their time studying, learning, doing good deeds. They do not waste their time. But we are not at that level yet. We are striving for that level. We may be at the level of 10 seconds doing what's right. Maybe if we're lucky, 25 seconds. We're trying to get through the day to be good. We're building up to that, slowly but surely. And so how are we going to spend our time in the holy pursuit? Someone asked me, he says, Rabbi, do you go to the movies? Right? Do you watch movies? Do you go to basketball games or baseball games and stuff like that? And so I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with going to a baseball game or a basketball game or football game. The question, though, is, am I spending the 2 hours of my day in the best possible manner, or can I spend it in a different way? In other words, is that the most productive way that I could utilize my time? So can I read a novel? Okay, maybe I can read a novel, right? But is that the best thing for me to be spending my time on by reading some kind of fiction? Or should I better spend my time learning or helping someone out, or growing, connecting to God more, praying? Now we have another issue that we don't necessarily think about, and that is that when we go and watch a movie, let's say, or read a fictional novel, again, it's not bad, but what happens is these images or these thoughts get stuck in our head. So now when I want to focus and concentrate on my prayers or on my learning, my mind begins to wander, begins to think about other stuff. So now the 2 hours that I spent on doing that thing, we can say there's nothing wrong with it. But what happens is, as human beings, these images remain in our head and they fill our mind even when we don't want to think about it. Or when we go to a sports game or we see things, in the streets or whatever it is, right? So now we are filling our head with these potential thoughts that are coming and in the way of a human being fulfilling their desire that God wants them, or how God wants them to live. So these actions are not inherently wrong or inherently bad or inherently unholy, but they are taking up space potentially in our brains when we're trying to focus on something holy or something more godly. And so Alter Rebbe says, wait a second. If you have this much space, don't you want to fill it with something more spiritual, something more godly? Again, one can argue, certainly, if a angel or a tzaddik, a righteous person, and I'm completely dedicated to God 100% of my time, okay, but I'm a human being. It's a little intense to think about the Creator all day, all night. I need to unwind. And so Alter Rebbe says, you need to, or do you want to? Do you need to because you need to recharge to be able to serve God, or do you want to because you just want to veg out on the couch and mindlessly watch some cooking show or something, Master Chef or whatever? Okay. And this is what Alter Rebbe addresses in this chapter. Now, he goes even further and talks about not only is it the things that we eat that are potentially clogging our arteries, spiritual arteries, as well as physical arteries, but also, as we will see in a moment, he calls it chachmas chitzonim, even foreign ideas like sciences. Should I be studying different sciences? Should I be studying medicine? Should I be studying the astronomy? Are these things a waste of time, or are these things helpful to me? So one can say studying medicine is actually a very productive thing, because if I study medicine, I understand the science of medicine, I can now go and help people, right? All right. So then the pursuit or the time I spent studying medical school or studying the sciences of the anatomy of the human being, then all that time that I've spent, I'm actually utilizing it to help others. So then I'm elevating that time also. But if I'm just studying the sciences just for the fun of studying the sciences with no benefit, godly benefit, then perhaps I'm wasting my time. Now, I know this is a heavy subject or a intense way to live, no question about it. But again, Alter Rebbe wants to say, wait a second. Here is the scenario you have to try to reach. We are over here. So let's understand what our goal is, and then we'll figure out how we're going to get there. So here in chapter 8, he's saying, this is what we want to do. You want to spend your time focused, whatever you're learning, whatever you're doing throughout the day, whether it's the science of psychology, of business, of medicine, of anything, whatever it is that we're doing, why am I doing it? What is the purpose of it? Okay. And then if I do engage in it for the wrong purposes, how do I clean myself up? Or am I forever going to be clogged? Am I forever going to have this burden that I've spent the time wasting or spent the time learning unnecessary things? Is it forever going to be inside of me? Or is there a way I can clean myself up? Okay. So let's look inside now. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is there a finite amount of space?
Excellent question. So if we're talking about our spiritual self has no limitations. So why are we saying that you're filling up your head with a certain thing and and then there's no more room for other stuff also? That is true. Excellent question. So Alter Rebbe is telling us that correct, that you have an infinite amount of space within our human beings, because after all, we're not talking about a finite thing. We're talking about a spiritual thing. A spiritual thing cannot be held, cannot be measured. It has unlimited aspects. However, when we're thinking about something, we can only think about that one thing. You can't think about two things at once. It doesn't work. So this is what Alter Rebbe is saying. If you want to think about God, and a moment earlier you were, I don't know, talking about the weather, you may come back to think about the weather. So if I tell you, don't think about a red horse, right? Even now I'm going to change the subject and we're going to talk about healthy food, a healthy diet. Somehow somewhere in there, you're still going to think about the red horse. It's hard to get that out of your head. So Alter Rebbe is saying, let's clear our minds from any of these type of behaviors that will only inhibit our spiritual growth. And especially when we stand up and we want to pray, what's going to happen then? It's going to fill our minds. We're going to think about all the things we have to do, the things we can do better. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. So now let's look inside here. We're going to go in the middle of chapter 8. If you have the book, it's one book is at page 128. What book is it on you? Avot Dvarim B'Telem, just like one page in, or 2 pages in.
Yeah, page 131.
131 in the Annie, 131 in the book that you have. Okay. All right. Val Dvarim B'Telem Heter. So at the beginning of the chapter, we start talking about foods. Now we're going to talk about innocent idle chatter, such as in the case of an ignoramus who cannot study. He who is able to study is constantly obligated to fulfill his commandments of studying Torah. For them, idle chatter is prohibited. But for ignoramus, however, idle chatter may be permitted. This person cannot study. For whatever reason, they just can't sit and learn. So what else should they do with their life? We don't want them engaging in bad things. Let them at least do idle chatter. That's not bad. Nothing wrong with that. So also, such a person must have his soul cleansed from the impurity of the klipa through its being rolled in the hollow of a sling at a state in the Zohar. Right. Let's pause for a moment and talk about what's going on over here. Our soul is sent down into this world to live a life 80, 90, 100, 120 years. After we die, what happens to our soul? It goes up to the soul banks. It hangs out with the other souls. But our soul spent 80, 90, 120 years on this earth. May God bless us, we should all live till 120. And it spent this time on earth, and it didn't necessarily spend the time in the most wisely of manners. So now it has some idle plaque that attached itself to the soul, or dirt, okay, that stuck to this gem of a soul. So now we have to clean off this dirt from the soul. So now when the soul meets its fellow souls, it's not a sore thumb. It doesn't look different. It can glow and shine like the rest of them. If it comes wearing the dirty boots or the dirty jacket from earth and wants to hang out and be invited with the other souls, it may be out of place. But we want the soul to feel comfortable and feel connected. So what has to happen? That soul has to be cleaned. Okay. Now, sometimes you can simply blow off the dust and it's clean. It's you. Buzzing. Sometimes it has to be scrubbed. So what is the scrubbing that is necessary? Well, the Rebbe says over here, that is through its being rolled in the hollow of a sling. This is taken from the book of Samuel. And he says like this, he shall sling out the souls of your enemies as out of a hollow of a sling. Samuel's referring to what happens to the soul after it dies, that the angels look at the soul and say, wow, this soul has been on earth. You've done so much good, but I see some dust or some hard substance that has stuck to this gem. We have to clean it out. Now, have you ever had a pen and had the ink was stuck in the pen? You want to get the ink out so you can write. So what do? Maybe you shake it a little bit, right? If it doesn't work, you shake it really, really hard. Okay. And if it doesn't work, you shake it really hard. Maybe even you bang it on the table a little bit. And so the soul is the same thing. The soul has to be clean. Sometimes the soul needs to be like a sling. It has to be thrown from one part of the world to the other part of the world till it's cleansed. It's cleaned out, and now it can hang out with the rest of the souls. So the angels take this. There you go. Wait. The angels take this soul and they throw it around in order to clean it out, to get the ink to flow, to get the godly energy to flow and to be revealed in the soul that has now been laying dormant or being hidden behind all these layers. So even something as simple as idle chatter, because that time was not spent in holy and spiritual pursuits, which we should have been doing, has to be cleansed. We can clean it here on earth, of course. Before we go to sleep, we can stand or sit and think about what we've done the entire day, how we've conducted ourselves, and think, wait, I really wasted 25 minutes on this silly thing that I really shouldn't have done. And I didn't use the energy that I spent this 25 minutes on anything holy. I completely wasted it, totally wasted it. So let me cleanse it off. Let me make a decision that I'm not going to do this activity again, or I'm going to spend my time tomorrow in a much better, a more productive manner. Okay, so that is called teshuvah. I'm repenting, regretting what I had done, and I'm making a resolution for the future.
So you never watch movies?
So I never said that. I never said that.
You feel guilty?
Well, the Rebbe is saying that the worldly matters, the worldly talk, the worldly engagement, whether it's the food that we eat, whether it's the idle talk about the weather or sports, whether it's the sciences of the world, whether it's medicine, astrology, psychology, human nature, whatever it is that we do. Am I using those experiences or that engagement to lead to a deeper engagement, to a more holy, a more focused, a more godly experience? Or am I going to go to sleep then? So going back to the earlier question. So if I grab that food before I run out the door to visit somebody else, if I'm sitting down to eat a meal and I'm thinking, okay, this is for God, I'm going to have energy, the meal's great. But if I didn't think of the meal, but I use that energy to do something good, that's also elevating it. So sometimes idle talk by itself, we don't have to think, oh, this idle talk is going to lead me to a deeper conversation. So when you call somebody up and you say, hey, how are you doing? Right? You don't have to think, oh, am I saying that? How are you doing? Just is that my wasting time? No, obviously not, because that conversation is going to lead to something positive. And that's really what Alter Rebbe is saying. Think about how we live our life, be more conscious and more present in how we are conducting ourselves. And by doing so, we will lead to a more productive, holier, and healthier lifestyle. And that's what Alter Rebbe is saying. This concludes chapter 8. Thank you very much. And I thank you for the questions, because that helped clarify and crystallize some of the things that we've been talking about. So the questions are good.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. I have a comment